Hey everybody, welcome to the sixth lesson of Walking Backwards, the gift to love one another. Tonight so far we have Jim, Mike and Dan. We were just discussing life in general and how things change, and I was watching John's lesson from yesterday, and obviously I'm thinking about what we're going to talk about tonight, and the thing that jumped off the page at me was one of the last things he said was, when we believe what God says about us is true, we're set free to love others like Christ. And that was at the very end. And the thing that really hit me, as well as that, free from what? Free from the law, free from the lies, free from our conditioning. He made a comment in the middle of it all about how when we're born again, hang on a second here, let me bring Tom in. Hey Tom.
Hey guys, sorry I had a few false starts.
Yeah, me too. If I disappear, it's because my laptop's. If I disappear, it's because my laptop's rebooting. So one of you's going to have to take over. We were talking about it before. It's like my laptop always wants to reboot or update at 7 o'clock on a Tuesday for some reason. Anyway, so the thing that was hitting me is it's important to start off and get the point across of what exactly did he do for us that we couldn't do for ourselves. For me, that one of the biggest things is meeting my needs. I was looking to see if we had if Bill had left one of his hierarchy of needs things up, but I couldn't find it. And the reason I wanted to bring that up again tonight, real quick, and then we'll move on, is because, like we've said before, the physical needs are at the bottom: air, food, water. Then you've got the personal needs, security and significance. Security being loved, accepted, and forgiven. Significance being meaning and purpose, important, adequate, and able. Now, these needs are met by God, and these needs aren't debatable. If they're not met, you die. So what God did for us, when you accept him into your life, what God did for us, what we couldn't do for ourselves, is meet those needs. Well, at the top of the hierarchy of needs is a need in us to love other people. And that's what he's talking about in that, when we believe what God says about us is true, when we believe those needs are met, we cannot help ourselves but to love other people. And honestly, including ourselves. The reason we live under law and lies, the reason that we set ourselves up is because we're not believing those needs are met. We fail miserably over and over again, apart from the behavioral weirdness that we could get caught up in. Mentally, we have to, John said it on Sunday, at some point we stop judging ourselves and we project and judge everybody else. Well, at least I'm not as bad as Jim or Dan. You should see what they did. You know what I mean? Now, this is in my head because I'm not going to do that to their face because I still need their approval, especially if I'm most definitely if I'm living under the law and the lies. But what Jesus set us free from by dying on the cross and us accepting him into our lives is he set us free to love other people. If you can't love other people, it's because you've got something to deal with. 9 times out of 10, it will always come back to those personal needs. You're not believing that they're met in my life. If I'm freaking about anything, if every single time it'll come back to, what am I believing? Am I believing that I'm loved? Am I believing that I'm important? Am I believing that I'm secure and significant? The other thing that really hit me is we talk about, and John was talking about it on Sunday, how not only do we have to trust God or want to trust God, we want to hear his voice. We want to hear what he has to say. That is our birthright. Because of who he's made us to be, we cannot not hear him. So I hear everybody saying, well, then how come I can't hear him? Ask him. He promised, my sheep know me and they hear my voice. A few years ago, well, a lot of years ago, we were looking after some sheep, and they had been in this pen for 6 months. They were 4-H sheep. They'd been in this pen for 3 months, and this pen was no bigger than this room, like 11 by 11. Every time you fed them, you had to lead them to where the food trough was. Otherwise, they would wander around for 20 minutes looking for the food trough like it had been moved. It's the same pen, the same, same colored boards, same ground. They can smell the same ground. But if you didn't lead them to the food trough, they would go hungry. They would lose patience. They would get frustrated, and they try and get out of that part of the pen. Well, Jesus calls us sheep. He knows us. He knows how fragile we are. He knows how delicate we are. And that's why this is all about him doing for us what we can't do for ourselves, which is loving other people, which is trusting him. We can want to, but we can't do it on our own. And that's the way it was designed. Jim, you got any thoughts on that? Or anything else?
It's hard to hear God's voice when we've already decided what we want him to say.
Say that again.
It's hard to hear God's voice when we've already decided what we want him to say. That's our own self. He's got to interrupt our self-talk. He's got to interrupt us because most of the time, 82% of our brain activity is self-talk and 90% of that's negative. So he's got to interrupt that, which he does. He takes the initiative. I was thinking, I listened to John a little while ago. And he was defining divine love again. Let me back up a little bit.
Sure.
Loving one another takes priority over everything else. Loving one another like Christ trumps everything else in life. As we grow and mature in our new identity, we automatically make that top of the list priority, loving one another. It's a given. It just happens. And it's a result of our relationship with him, knowing that we are loved, and it's overflowing on everything and everybody. You don't even mentally make that happen. It just happens. God is at work through his Spirit to break our natural intense conditioning. And John used the word intense. It jumped off the page at me. I wrote it down because our conditioning is intense. Like last week, I was talking about the paper towel holder, having to retrain your brain from, to the one-handed now. You don't have to hold the roll. How it's a process. We're transformed by the renewing of our mind. So the Holy Spirit is in there. It's kind of like reprogramming the computer. Slaves, we were coming from being slaves to sin, and now we're slaves to righteousness. Either way, we're not in control. That's another thing that jumped off. It's like control is just an illusion. You're either going to serve one or the other. And the moment that we're born again, the old man's dead. So there's no more slave to sin. Sin shall not have dominion over you. So now we're slaves to righteousness. We have right now the mind of Christ, the Spirit of Christ, and the calling of Christ as ambassadors for Christ. We have that already. And then he was talking about good works being a pleasurable service. It's the most satisfying, fulfilling life you could ever have, he said before. And I'm walking in that. I'm finding out that's true. So now we get to the definition of the divine love. To love one another like Christ, that's divine love, which is first unconditional, sacrificial, eternal or consistent, initiating, and intelligently. He talked about speaking in tongues, and the religious leaders, religion, to religion, that's proof that you're a Christian if you can speak in tongues. I remember those days. So the whole thing was learning how to speak in tongues, and he said he practiced. She rode in on a Honda. You say that real fast several times.
Shit about a Honda, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
She rode in on a Honda. Right. And then he got into the desiring the best gifts. And he kind of defined, he said that King James didn't do a good translation of that because it was more of a rebuke. You are continuing to covet the best gifts. And it reminds me of the disciples always fighting who was going to be the greatest. So, which we have that going in even now because that's the nature of the flesh. We all still have the flesh in us. So that's going on at the same time, if we're honest. Because we want to be noticed, or we want to attaboy, or we want to be the greatest. The flesh is trying to jump in there. So the Lord said it's self-centered. That's where the self-centeredness comes in. And then Paul was talking about in chapter 13 of 1 Corinthians that Yet I want to show you a more excellent way. And that was the love chapter,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I wrote down following the rules causes us to be self-centered. Anytime that we're back under the law, we're self-centered because you're more focused on keeping the rules, which means you're focused on yourself and your performance. The self-centeredness comes in there. Or we're going to love other people, Christ-centered. So he reminded me of the double yellow lines in the road. Okay. He said, sometimes we have to break the rules to love someone else. And the example is a double yellow line. Well, the law says you get a ticket if you cross the double yellow, right? So all the law can do is condemn, judge and condemn. It can prove that you're guilty. So say you go across the yellow line, double yellow, you get a ticket, you go to court, and the judge asks you, did you cross the double yellow line? Well, yes. Okay, guilty, and you got to pay the ticket. He doesn't ask you why. Okay, law demands justice. Grace looks at the reason why, looks at the motive. So why did you cross the double yellow line? If the judge would ask, why did you cross the double yellow line? Well, it's because there were 2 people on a bicycle and 3 people walking behind them in the road. I had to go around them to keep from hitting them. So you had to break the rule to run over the double yellow line to love the people, to keep from hitting them and killing them. Follow me? You had to break the rule in order to love the people. So what jumped off there was how the law is only concerned about proving you're guilty. It doesn't look at why. It only looks at the what. It doesn't look at the why. Grace looks at the why. You know, God looks at our motives. He doesn't care what we do or don't do. He wants to know, why did you do it? He's always looking at our motives. So then I've got, if you're not listening to the leadership of the Spirit, John said, we will automatically fall back to leaning on our own understanding of what's right and what's wrong. So we're either going to listen to the Spirit and be led by the Spirit, or we're going to fall back on our own understanding of what's right and wrong. And we flip-flop back and forth. You could, I mean, even now I do it. I think Tom said it's a process one time of coming into grace and that newness of life. It's a process. I think the point for me is all I have is a desire. I want to hear God and I want to walk in his ways. I want to hang out with him. I want to fellowship with him. I'm all about the relationship. And at the same time, I realize I can't make that happen. All I can do is want it. He's the one that makes that happen. So once again, it's God in us, God who works in us, causing us both to will and to do his good pleasure. It's God, his Spirit in us, giving us the want to, the will, and the ability to do his good pleasure, which is whatever he's called us to do, moment by moment, step by step, day by day. That's all I got.
Cool, man.
Hey, can I add to that, or
Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
just to go back to what Jim was? He started off talking about the voice, and then just hearing God's voice. It's for me when I was going coming up in this, it was almost impossible to get the focus off of myself and love other people unless I knew I was loved, unless I had that confirmation, you know. And part of that was, you know, we're joking about speaking in tongues and, you know, that being a confirmation that you're a Christian and all like that. But you started hearing people talking about hearing God's voice, and then you're not, or you think you're not, or he's talking, you know, whatever the situation is, but you're just not recognizing his voice. And what God had brought me to is it was crazy. I kept seeing, I was like, why can't I hear you, Lord? Why can't I hear you? And then I had a dream, and I was in Times Square in New York, and I was on one side of the street, and there's all the traffic and taxi cabs and the chaos of, you know, all the people walking, and it's loud, you know, it's all that ambient noise. And I look and I see Jesus on the other side of the street, and he's yelling to me, but I can't make out his voice over all the other noise, the buses and taxi cabs and people and cars, horns beeping. And as I kept listening, he's hollering. And then as I focused, all of a sudden I heard, "Can you hear me?" And I could pick his voice out of all the other noise. So, you know, to go from there, what was, it was funny because after that we went through a little lesson in Alpha, and it followed right up behind that where it was recognizing somebody's voice. And so, like with your kids or anyone that you've been in a relationship with for a long time, like even you, Martin, I mean, without the English accent and all that, it's if I closed my eyes and there was a line of, you know, 10 guys and you each said my name, I would know your voice just because I've known you for so long. I would recognize your voice. So it goes back to, Martin, what you were saying. My sheep know me, and they know my voice. But Jesus kept on going after that. He said, and the stranger's voice they will not follow. So it's almost like God is, what I found out is he was talking the whole time. I could hear him. But like when I was looking at him across Times Square, I couldn't distinguish his voice from the rest of them. And so over time, as you start to tune your ear to his voice, all of a sudden the other voices begin to lose their power. And over time, as you keep practicing and listen to his voice, and you do that by, you know, you hear him, he'll say something, you know, you're praying to him, asking him something, and he'll give you instruction, and then you do it and it works out fine. And you're like, oh, that was God. That was him. And so it begins to build that faith up in you to trust the voice. And then you build that relationship. And then after a while, it doesn't matter what you're going through. You could have your eyes closed in the middle of Times Square, and he could holler your name, and you'll recognize his voice.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And so I was saying all that to say this is, when, you know, we get so wrapped around, I can't hear God, and it brings that self-focus in that, you know, like John was talking about, it's that you're always focused on self because you're still, your needs haven't been met. You still haven't heard his voice. You don't feel loved. So you can't focus on anything else. You can't love other people. But he was talking the whole time. We just have to start to separate all the voices. That's it. That's all I wanted to add.
Awesome.
Go ahead, Tom.
Oh, okay. Well, I tell you, one thing John said Sunday that I'm sure he said it before, and maybe you guys have heard it, but I don't think I've ever heard it before. And what I mean, you're laughing, I think you know what I mean, is that, you know, how many times does it go over your head before
Yeah. Yeah.
it finally sticks, and then it becomes like this most amazing revelation as you've ever heard. But he talked about eating from the tree of life versus eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. We've been talking the last several messages he's done has been about a lifestyle of grace versus a lifestyle of law and lies. And I really, I think I'm getting it when he talks about that lifestyle of law and lies is characterized by eating from the knowledge of good and evil, so that we can make ourselves worthy when we're armed with that knowledge. And I think I get that. But what I think I had been missing was the eating from the tree of life. In other words, getting all of your nourishment, everything you need in the context of not just physical nourishment, but also personal nourishment. All of your personal needs being met that we talked about is when we eat from the tree of the knowledge, eat from the tree of life, which is Jesus himself. And then my mind made the jump today when I heard that, and I didn't have time to go back and research the verse. Maybe one of you guys know it right off the top of your head. But when Jesus talked about, unless you eat my flesh and drink my blood, you have no life in you. And obviously that can only be understood in a spiritual context, that that really he is the giver of and the source of life. It happens through the power of the Spirit, actually, as the conduit of that knowledge, that life, that everything that we need, the comfort, the teaching, the nurturing. The Holy Spirit is the conduit, but the source is actually from him. He is the tree of life. And I don't know, it just blew me away that I had never really considered that as part of the opposite of a lifestyle of law and lies. In other words, that is what grace is all about, is eating from that tree of life. And in the Cowboy Church thing that I've been doing on Sundays, I've been in Ephesians chapter 3, man. I've been there like for 6 months, guys. Ephesians is only a 6-chapter book. And I keep trying to make the jump from Ephesians 3 to Ephesians 4. But what happens there, and I'll put it in relational empowerment terms or alpha terms, is that the transition that happens from Ephesians 3 to Ephesians 4 is a turning the corner moment for these people. And what I mean by that is that now they're turning their attention away from their own needs being met, because they are, as Paul used the words, rooted and grounded, in Christ. And then he also, a couple verses later, right at the end of chapter 3, I think it's verses 18, right in there, he starts on this rooted and grounded, and also having the fullness of Christ. And without having that fullness, his love can't overflow, because, like, if you think of it in terms, and I know it's kind of cliche, but the terms of a cup overflowing, you got to keep pouring something into it before it finally gets full enough to overflow. And I believe that's what happens to us. As Jim was talking about, now we can turn our attention to other people because our needs are being met on a consistent basis. That gives us the ability to overflow to others rather than try to generate that on our own, which is, an exercise in frustration and futility. It becomes allowing him to fill us, eating from him, having his life in us, flowing through us, flowing to other people. And I keep coming back to this rooted and grounded, because, like, if you're rooted, that means, first of all, you're firmly planted, right? It also means that you're getting all your nourishment. And if you want to put it in physical terms, food and water, you're getting it from the source. In spiritual terms, that becomes the love, the acceptance, the personal needs being met, security and significance That's the rooting and grounding from that source. And then being grounded means that you're standing on solid bedrock with him. So that's really what all of these things in a composite are what I think came to the focus with me when John said eating from the tree of life. So I'll stop at that point.
I think that lines up also with what Jim was saying about the intelligent love. I'm sure we've all got stories where we heard the good news and ran out loving other people and got absolutely stomped on, or lost a lot of money, or lost a lot of time, or a little bit of both. I know I've told stories on here where I thought I was doing the right thing, and part of the lesson was just like in Corinthians, where it talks about just because you've got the knowledge, just because you've got the all these gifts, just because you've got the behavior right, because you've got the the religious acts down, it means nothing if there's no love. Well, there is no love because I'm not being told to do it from above. So it's me back trying to meet my own needs, but instead of just with a religious veneer, I'll get the attaboy, I'll get the thank you for delivering that food, or thank you for going and feeding the homeless, or helping this woman move, or you will get a need met, but it will last 30 seconds. Yeah, good point, Tom. That foundation that's what keeps you going, man. It's what keeps you going, because it's not what did John say? Ministry was, the Greek translation was slavery.
Yeah.
It's, we're not talking the TBN kind of ministry. We're talking in the trenches, with the junkies, whores, and thieves, and tax collectors.
But the other side of it, he also talked about it being a pleasurable service, and Jim touched on that. That ministry is a pleasurable service, and that in desiring the best gifts, another thing I got out of that was desiring the best gifts for me personally. Absolutely. Because, in other words, rather than me focus on what your gifts are and admiring your talents and saying, hey, I wish I could be just like you, then I would really be okay. I think it's like, no, those are your gifts, and they're there for my benefit in many cases, and the benefit of the others. I can see that. What I want to desire is my gifts. In other words, God tells me, first of all, what my gifts are, because if they're my gifts, they're going to be pleasurable to use. In other words, he's going to give me a job. I've always been amazed that when I really felt God gave me a job, I'm like, man, I'm so lucky. He always gives me the easy jobs. Well, maybe they're easy because they're easy for me. And I'm not saying that there's sometimes not obstacles. There's always obstacles, but they're easy for me. If God gave you my job, you probably say, that's not so easy. I can't do that. I don't want to do that. Well, it's the same way of flip it around. Your jobs are easy and pleasurable for you. For me, I'd be totally intimidated perhaps if he gave me your job. But it also, it reinforces too our significance, because each of us has a unique job, a unique gift, and that reinforces our personal significance, meeting another need, to be, meaning and purpose and all that. So I think that's all pretty cool.
Yeah, ministry could be a two-edged sword depending on your motive while you're in it. If you're in it trying to get your needs met, then you ever meet someone who said that they're burnt out from ministry?
Yeah.
Well, why are you doing it? What are you there for? Are you getting your needs met?
Yeah, you're working at a job that you hate. That's what I'm saying. It's supposed to be a pleasurable service. That's the promise.
I think someone said one time,
until you don't get your needs met one day from the ministry.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, joy in the journey. You know, he gives us joy in the journey that we're on. Jim, every point that I had on my paper, you just took it and ran with it and said everything, you know. So I guess I was right because you're right, you know. So, but anyway, but yeah, exactly every last one, even the 5 ways to love, because Alpha talks about 3 ways, you know, intelligent, initiating, and unconditional. But he throws the other in there, consistent, sacrificial, which I thought was good. But I was thinking about hearing from God. I've been in the way, and that's probably been an obstacle in the way for a long time. But one of my mentors was an old Quaker guy, and he gave me some advice. He said, if you want to hear from God, set yourself on that fence in behind Jim, Tom right there. Okay? Set yourself on the fence and be willing to fall off on either side. And then probably you won't bias what you're hearing and what Jim was talking about. And the other thing, you know, and we've got to get our ideas out of the way. And not try to tell God how he's going to solve the problem. And I was also thinking about what Dan said there. Sometimes we have to quiet all the noise, you know, because there's all the time stuff coming in, you know, just bombarding with things, and get quiet before God to hear his voice, I think, too. But that's the only thing. And his yoke is easy. And it's right. And if you're finding it toilsome, you're not in the right yoke. Okay, it's just like you said, it is pleasurable service. So that's basically what I got from it, and I you know, I enjoyed it, and I regret that I'm not going to be able to be there in person, but Lord willing, I'm going to log in, you know, remotely and get the thing going. But that's all I've got.
I think ultimately what it comes down to is, have we had enough of living under the law and the lies? You know, like we said last week, there's a certain amount of security in the familiarity of the weirdness.
But I think Alpha says there's a glory in the law, in that we can think we're doing it, and we can point out where other people are not doing it.
Right.
You know, and you think about that. That's
Right.
You know, and people can throw
And
the shoulder.
and that's
out.
where
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
that's where we get our worth from. Because
Right.
we're smarter, or we're more knowledgeable than so and so. And that's
Right.
how we get our worth. Right.
Yeah, look how much better I am than you. I'm keeping this law and you're not.
Yeah.
Right. The self-righteousness comes in.
Absolutely. When I first got started in this way, I was in a men's group at let me see, I guess it was in Indiantown, where they had the 2-story house. It wasn't in Indiantown where the 2-story
Yeah.
house was. Harry Herman was there, and David Hempfield. And David would lead the group. And because I was, I was just coming out of the school of Gamaliel and the Pharisees, Hempfield would speak truth into my life, and then he would blow me away and go out and smoke a cigarette afterwards. And I just couldn't reconcile that two in my thinking, you know. But I called him a Black Moses, man. You know, he spoke so much truth into my life. And a lot of my former associates, you know, they think they're free now because they're not as radical as they used to be, but they don't understand that God got rid of the net. We don't have a law net to catch us anymore. There's no law that keeps us. We're kept by the power of God. And radical, scandalous freedom and surprising faithfulness. That's sort of my watchword in this whole thing. I'm free to do anything I want to do, not free from consequences from stupid stuff, but I can do it. God still loves me. And it surprises me how there's joy in the journey, you know, pleasing him. Those, what is it? Pleasurable. service, pleasurable service. Yeah.
So
I
walking in love, love fulfills the law. So it's not the fact that nobody's abiding by the law anymore. It's the motivation has changed. Instead of trying to keep the rules and then loving somebody, we're loving somebody yet keeping the rules. It's the motivation has changed. Not do this and live. It's live but do this.
Right. Well, it's
So-
not what you do, it's why you do it. That's what he's talking about in 1 Corinthians 13 there. You can do all this stuff, but if you're doing it for the wrong reason, you're a sounding brass and a tinkling cymbal. Yeah.
And he said in the, if you speak with tongues of men and of angels, okay, so if you speak, so you can speak and have not love.
Right.
You can give and have not love. He was saying there was 3 of them that he said. I forget the other one, but the point I was wanting to get at is,
All the mysteries and
yeah, you can be the smartest, wisest person on the planet and have not love, right? So what is the love he's talking about? That's the personal, intimate relationship with Jesus Christ. Love. God is love. It's the relationship. And have not the relationship. Follow me? Then it's just you running the show.
Right.
Your flesh is, and a lot of times we deceive ourselves. You know, it can dress itself up and look like it's a true believer.
Oh, yeah.
So, right, like you were saying, Mike.
Absolutely. Yeah. You know, and I caught something you said there. I got a little thing. It's not only why you do it, that it's by love, but it's not our love. We have to, as Tom said, feed off the tree of life so that we have that love to give those. It's not our love, it's his love that goes through us to whatever we're doing. If it's not done in agape love, then you know it's going to be burned up. I mean, all those works that he talks about there. So
I've heard it said that you become like whoever you hang out with.
Yeah.
The stronger person, if somebody in the crowd has a strong personality, then everybody else has a tendency to take on that personality, whoever has the strongest personality, right? So if we're hanging out with God, if we're hanging out with love, then we're going to become just like that. So, like Tom was talking about the cup being overfilled. You're hanging out with love. He's loving you, first of all, because he's initiating. We love him because he first loved us, right? He's loving us. We're experiencing it. We're feeling it. And we're loving him back for loving us so much that it's overflowing on everybody else, everything and everybody. You're not focused on doing anything for God. You're just loving him back for loving you, and it overflows on everything and everybody. That's the relationship. That's all from a result of the relationship.
amen.
So now it all comes back to the relationship, right?
Oh, yeah.
And then John said he was talking about raising the dead, how he wanted, desire the best gifts, and he wanted to raise the dead instead of speaking in tongues. God told him, "You're not ready to die yet." And then he told him the true meaning of that. And he said, every time that he proclaims the gospel of Jesus Christ and someone believes it, he just raised them from the dead, and it's eternal life. They're not going to die again like Lazarus or
Amen.
whoever was raised from the dead had to die again, right?
Well, that, and another thing is it's not just the final eternal life, but it's life in this world, because what I've seen with John and what he's taught us to do is that, you know, there's just so many Christians that are they're born of the Spirit, they're born again, they're saved, whatever you want to call it, they're believers, but they're not thriving in this life. They're bogged down, and life has become pretty heavy going, as it says in the big book AA, you know, and they're just not they're not finding life satisfying, and they're really literally the Walking Dead, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, and I've seen, and I'm one of them that you know, God used John to give me some life, you know, and connect me to that vine, you know. And it also came up, we were talking earlier about, you know, Jesus gave the lesson of being the vine and the branches. He says, apart from me, you can't do any of this. You can't do anything apart from me. It all comes from me. You know, because I'm the Father's the vine dresser. I'm the vine, you're the branches. Everything comes through me to you and flows out and goes to other people, you know. So, yeah, you know, I've seen that resurrection time and time and time again, you know, and not just in John's ministry, but the ministry that each of us, that I, you know, the guys, I don't know you as well, Dan, but look forward to that. But, you know, I've seen each of you guys in action, you know, God using you, you know. Yeah.
So, what's the one thing that really hit you out of the Sunday message? The one thing that resonated with you? Anyone?
Well, to me, it was a Tree of Life thing, so I'll stand on that.
So when you say the Tree of Life, and I'm lining it up with what you were saying about you can't get out of Ephesians 3, is that the same corner that Jim was talking about turning just a minute ago? You know, when you realize that you're full.
Yeah.
You know, when you realize that it doesn't get any better than it does right now, then you can, you know, so we're talking the milk and the meat, right?
Yeah, that's what the milk and the meat's another good example of that, another way of putting it. But, you know, again, I was talking about being stuck in Ephesians 3, and the Spirit slowing me down, I mean, to a crawl. I was gonna mention the 5 characteristics of God's love to that group, you know, that I'm working with, almost as a 10-minute segment of a 30-minute lesson. And now he's telling me that I want you to spend a week on each characteristic. That's important, you know, because you can't give what you don't have, which is also really cool because it's so totally fair. God is not asking us to do anything, you know, that he's not providing for. You know, can't give what you don't have. But, you know, and this is something that John had told me a long time, or showed me a long time ago. When you look at Paul's writings, you know, the first couple chapters of each of his books is always focused on the relationship, as Jim was talking about, between you and the Lord, you know, and how he has done everything necessary to bring us in relationship with him.
Yes.
And until that happens, well, it's happened, but until we're aware of it and enjoy the benefits of it to at least some degree, we can't turn the corner. It's not
right.
Because we're always going to run back to what we know, and that's the knowledge of good and evil.
Right.
Whatever flavor of our knowledge it is, that's where we're going to run for cover, you know, right off the bat. So it's so critically important to make sure that you don't encourage anyone to turn the corner until they're ready.
Right.
And
I mean, honestly, I know when I talk to a few of you guys, all of you over a period of time, ultimately our conversation always comes back to who we are, who God has made us to be, because that's our focus. And I'm not saying that to toot our horns, but it's nice, you know, when we do get to meet in person. I mean, it's nice doing this, don't get me wrong. I mean, it does me the world of good. That's why I do it. But when you're around a bunch of like-minded men, women, children, whatever. It does you good, man. It does you good on the inside.
Oh yeah.
But it's
Because-
just so easy to be drawn back into that law and lies, you know. That's why do we hear John preach the same thing Sunday after Sunday? To reinforce the truth.
Sure.
That's just I was thinking about we're able ministers, the ministry of reconciliation. It is extremely humbling to think he would use us, but at the same time, very empowering. Does that make sense? Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally, mate. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
And speaking of that model, before we turn the corner, the 12 steps is another fantastic example of that.
Totally.
Because almost a little over half the steps are what God's doing for you that you can't do for yourself, and in experiencing that. So that's the relationship. But there's at least 5 steps at the end where you turn the corner and you start focusing your attention on others. But you can't do that until you've spent a lot of time experiencing him.
The meat and the milk, just like you said. If we don't get the milk down, we can never go on the meat because we'll choke on it. You know.
Sure.
You know. So
Yeah.
he said, "I would that you were spiritual, but because you're still carnal, I've got to bring you back to the elementary things. You know, because you're coming back and eating off that law tree instead of the tree of life."
And we all need that. We need that every day, by the way. It's not like, okay, one day for the people out in the audience there, you know, that one day you're going to wake up and say, okay, got it.
Yeah. Don't need you. Don't need it anymore. Yeah.
His yoke is love.
Mm.
So
That's right.
take my love upon you and learn of me.
Mm-hmm.
So he's not concerned about us doing anything for him. He wants us to sit back and let him love us.
An
And
experience.
that's it. Don't go anywhere else. You sit right there, and then the next thing you know, it's overflowing on everybody else, and you don't even know you're doing it.
Right.
Because we're in the yoke. He's loving us. We're loving him back, and it overflows on everything and everybody.
And in the ministry, he's doing the heavy lifting. It's his yoke. It's not our yoke.
Yeah.
You know, we're just learning. We're the yearling in there with a big strong ox. You know, Jesus. You know. So yeah. Hey, the old adage, I've proven him true. He says what he will do. You know, and I've tasted. I know what I'm talking about. But do I get it right every time? Do I trust him all the time? No. But I'm getting better at it.
Because of my conditioning and the fact that I never trusted anything or anybody, and I was gun shy, the Lord actually said to me, "Let me love you." I wouldn't let him. He was trying. I mean, all my life he's been there. I shouldn't even be here. Okay. I shouldn't even be here. And that's him taking care of me, keeping me from dying several times. Okay.
Yes.
And my thing was, I could see other people walking in. One of us said it, the fullness of Christ. I don't know who said it, but Tom, maybe that was you. I couldn't ever, other people can experience God's love for them. I couldn't. And he told me because I wouldn't trust him. I wouldn't let him love me. Okay, well, for whatever reason, you're opening a can of worms there, because now he's got to do some surgery on you from all the conditioning as to how did I get into that,
Yeah.
That goes back to what Tom was saying. You know, the first half of the 12 steps is surgery on us, so that we can deal with other people. You know, so that we can give this away. And honestly, what does what does that surgery look like? For me, it was showing me that I was lovable. It was showing me that I was forgiven. It was showing me that I was accepted. It showed me that I was important because he told me I was important. And that I mean, we could all tell the same story. You know, we could all sit here one by one and tell the same story, the way that he showed up for us in a way that we needed it. You know, it's like my sheep know me and I know them. I know what they need. I know what language they speak. I know what, you know, I know that this one over here lives in the city and this one lives in the country and this one lives on a mountain and this one lives in a valley. No matter where you live or where you come from, he is the tree of life. I mean, that was brilliant, Tom. He is the tree of life.
He calls them by name and they follow him.
Yeah.
It will be painful because, like, sorry, Dan, like it says, you know, if your eye offends you, poke it out. If your hand, offends you, chop it off. It's going to be painful letting go of that conditioning.
Boy, we'd all be one-eyed and limping around all over.
I look like a pirate.
Missing body parts. What got me, one of the things that stuck with me with John when he talked about the definition of ministry, you know, and it means slavery and I just started going in my head. I was like, wait, who the Son sets free is free indeed. You shall know the truth and it shall set you free. And then I went to the scripture where it says, unto who you give yourself, you know, you become a slave of, whether you're a slave unto righteousness, a slave unto, and I was like, so wait, I could be a slave unto righteousness. And then I added in here, I was like, wait, I could be a slave to myself, you know, trying to get my needs met, you know, slave to sin. But only one of those forms of slavery provides freedom. You know, so it's like this big oxymoron, you know, it just makes your head hurt. Wait, yeah. I can get free, but I'm also always going to be a slave, you know?
Yeah.
Because, you know, especially now with all the talks of reparations and all that, you know, I was like, Lord, you know, where's my reparations? I'm a slave no matter which way I turn.
Yeah, another word for slave is server.
Yeah, he said,
like a waitress in a restaurant.
Yeah. He said, well, good thing he's paid it all. So,
a couple of thoughts on that. First of all, when the word ministry, you know, we tend to take it in the United States in the context of that's something that's reserved for people who are properly qualified and trained and wear special clothes and hold special offices and all that.
But in other countries, you go to,
yeah, in other countries, you know, they have like the Ministry of Education or the Minister of Defense. In other words, these are the people that just administer the policies of the government. So if we translated that into kingdom language, that what is Christ's policy? His policy is love. So our job is to administer his policy. So we just get to hand it out. We get to hand out his love, you know. So I think that's it disarms a lot of those religious, at least a lot of the religious baggage that I've got, you know, about what ministry is, you know.
Good point.
You know, rather than that person that stands up there like John was saying and tells everybody else what to do, you know, what not to do, you know, based on the knowledge of good and evil. So yeah, and there was another thought in there, but my old man's brain just dumped it. I don't know where it went.
You remember it later when you lay down.
I'll be worthy if I can remember what I was thinking 2 seconds ago.
Yeah.
So fun.
Well, anybody got some final thoughts? We've killed an hour in record speed.
Yeah, where to go? Wow.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for having me tonight, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome, Dan. Yeah.
Please be a regular.
Yeah. Feel free, Dan. You're welcome back anytime.
Okay.
So Freedom Ranch on Sunday, right, Tom? 11 o'clock.
Yep. We'll be. Let's see. This will be the first Sunday of the month, so we'll have communion services like we always do, and then it'll be. I think the broadcasts on YouTube are getting better.
Yeah.
Easier to hear. And let's see what else we got. I do the Cowboy Church thing that's been going on.
When is that? Sunday mornings, right?
Yeah, I
What
do
time?
it at 9, unless I'm going to be traveling. Like last week, I knew I was going to be on the road Sunday morning, so I just broadcast it. I use StreamYard just like we are right now, but I can't figure out how to do the delay, because I'll tell it to play later, but it seems to play live on Facebook the minute I'm doing it, because people are already making comments. But no matter, it's there. It remembers it forever, and it also goes to the Alpha page. And let's see what else we got going.
Reach Community Church.
Yep.
Yep. Sunday at 9.
Yep. Yeah, and I know Bill saw him. He's not with us tonight. He's been doing that men's group at his house on Monday nights for 25 years.
Forever. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good group.
All right, guys. Well, thank everybody for watching. Got John, Alexander, Kelly, Patrick, Dar.
Hey, John.
We'll be back in next week, same time, same place. Have a good night.
You too.